Hello, my most amazing scholars of truth, goodness, and beauty. I am really hoping that you are ready to capture some beauty this week because we are going to finish the photography tips that I started last week, and you'll be able to take your pictures for the last 3 parts of this project. So I'm going to review really quickly the ones that we already went over last week, and then I'm going to teach you the new ones for this week. And you can take some photos and send them to me. All right, the first tip for getting a good picture is that think about composing a picture that has wonderful texture. And the way to get texture is by doing a close-up. So number 1 was close-up. There's a couple examples. Number 2 was simple background. And remember I said that the picture on the left here was not a good example because that wall art in the background was really distracting. So having a simple background is better, like these dogs in the snow, like the wooden fence, and like blurring the background if you can't get a simple background, as in this photo right here. All right, and then the third rule I taught you was the rule of thirds, which was to think about your frame as a tic-tac-toe grid, and then any of these points where the grid intersects is a good place to put your focal point, like the leaf on these boots or the flower on this landscape. All right, number 4, here we go. The next one is to frame your subject. And I'm not saying an actual frame, like made out of wood and glass. I'm saying that whatever you have in your photo, think about trying to put a natural frame. It doesn't happen for every photo, but it's a kind of a fun thing to look for. So in this picture, you'll see an old shriveled up corn cob, and the natural frame is on the top and the bottom. It's the corn husks that are framing what's in the middle. And you'll notice that this also meets the idea of rule of thirds, because this is clearly the focal point, this one juicy kernel of corn. And it also shows texture. It's one of those close-ups. So this has a lot of things going for it. This is also a good example for framing your subject. So for example, this one on the left with the chain, you probably would have to be laying on your belly on the hard gravel to get this picture. The chain is framing the rest of the train in that picture. That's a good clue. Like if you are trying to really get a good shot, you might, as the photographer, have to get in an uncomfortable position. You might have to draw a little attention to yourself by kneeling on the ground or laying on your back or standing on a chair. Those are all things that photographers do to get the best composition, to get the best shot. This is a photo I took in South Dakota, and we were looking up at Mount Rushmore, and we were walking under like a tunnel or in a walkway, and I looked through these 2 rocks and saw part of the statue up there. And so I thought, well, that makes kind of a cool frame. So this is a diagonal frame around the statue. Now, also, you might not think of this, but you can use people as frames. So in this photo, you can see that I've got this gentleman talking to this gentleman, and the way they're facing each other makes a perfect frame for the action going on in the middle there of the kids on the tube. So get creative with what can be a frame. It's not always something that is an object. It could be living things. Oh, here is one of my favorite composition tips. If you can get a photograph that uses leading lines, everyone's going to think you're an expert. I mean, they're super impressive. So here's what you need to look for. To have leading lines, you have to look for disappearing perspectives and repetition. And so what that means is find something that's repeating and goes off into the distance. And then position your body in such a way so that when you take a photo, those repeating things are going in a diagonal line off into the distance. And they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller as they go. These haystacks create a line that goes off into the distance, and it looks amazing. All right, let's see what other examples I have for that. Oh yeah, so this one is like a train or a bus, something that normally wouldn't be all that interesting for a photo, but look at the cool perspective here. The photographer noticed these repeating wooden handles or armrests, and of course the repeating benches. And the way that the diagonal line goes this way and that way, you can tell that it's bigger here, smaller out there. It really creates for an interesting, repetitive perspective. And our building, Parnassus. This photo was actually taken by one of my 4G students a couple of years ago, and they noticed the repeating windows that were kind of going in a diagonal line if they stood on the side. So this picture wouldn't be quite as interesting if they just took it looking straight on at the building. But if you're looking down the sidewalk on the edge of the building, you can see it's got these diagonal lines that get smaller and smaller, or it creates like a disappearing perspective out in the distance. And it happens here with the sidewalk lines and the repeating windows and the roof line. That's a cool perspective. Matthew Brady even knew this trick. This is one of his photos of the Civil War, and you can see that he used leading lines here as well. What's repeating here? I see cannons repeating. There's about 3 of them there. Soldiers standing in a line, so that's repetitive. This wall right here is another leading line. You can see the pathway over here is a leading line. So Matthew Brady even understood that if you stand in the right perspective, if you can kind of see it from a different view, it makes for a more interesting picture than if you're just looking straight on. Okay, and our last photography tip that I want to see if you can capture is interesting lighting. Now, lighting is something that you won't master in 4th grade. Lighting is a very tricky part of photography, and I am not even an expert at it. So I don't expect you to really be able to manipulate your camera to get the best kind of lighting, or, understand exactly how that works. But what I do want you to look for, and what I am perfectly sure that you can figure out, is I want you to look for bright spots and shadows. And when you can find some bright spots and some shadows, you might get some cool pictures that involve interesting lighting. So for example, we've got here a shadow and a bright spot in this leaf. We've got some darker leaves and some leaves where the sun is shining through them. You can see here that the sunlight on these plants makes them bright, and there's dark shadows all around. Same thing on this picture here. You can just tell that the sun is shining right on that leaf there. And you've got the bright spots up here and the shadows down here. And then the other thing is not a separate tip, but it's just a good reminder that since you're probably using something that doesn't take actual film, you can take as many shots as you want and then decide on the best one. So maybe you're trying to take a picture like this of this leaf and you want to do the rule of thirds. You might try it a few different ways. If you want to put it in this corner or that corner, and then later on when you're looking at your photos, you can delete the ones that aren't your favorites and keep the ones that are the best. All right, this is an interesting perspective. So this is also leading lines. We've got the repeating shapes, and they go from big to medium to small. All right, that's it. I hope you are inspired to do some photos on your device. I will need you to get that piece of paper out. That's the list of your photography tips. It has 6 spaces on there for you to write descriptions of the pictures that you take. Your assignment is to take 3 pictures. You can take more than 3, but to send me 3 pictures, either through email or you can post them on Seesaw. And those need to be the 3 things we discussed today. So that would be frame your subject, it would be leading lines, and it would be lighting. Now, if you didn't send me the 3 pictures from the week before, I'll also need close-up, simple background, and of course I forgot the last one. What is it? What is it? What is it? Close-up, simple background. Oh, one of my favorites, rule of thirds. So that's about it. Go ahead and take a photo of the list that you make and the descriptions you write and upload that to Seesaw so I can give you a good grade on this assignment.